maybe I must begin by thanking you both to create time and for this political public education. We are obviously going to discuss a very important moment in the ANC history, which in every single conversation is handled with legend, lots of myths, but also undoubtedly a make or break moment. One of the most important make or break moments in ANC. The Chris Hani Memorandum and the Morogoro Conference. It seems to me that there are all types of, and we've already on your individual interviews had reflections about the key historical factors, the key historical developments, also the outcomes, the key, which is the strategy and tactics. And the ANC for the first time officially adopts the National Democratic Revolution as a primary theory of the struggle, for which in the SACP it would have been in 1962, Road to Freedom. Very important. I think it changes the complexion of the struggle. So let me start with you, Comrade Ronnie, by order of age.
I'm grateful for your age.
It looks like also you may have, because I mean, it's just also the advice. We don't know what would have been my choices, but I'm happy we don't have to even find out because I'm way younger. But you would have been at the very founding moment of Umkhonto Wesizwe and led, and we have explored this in your own episode. But can you lay the field for us? What is the state of the organization when the group, which Chris Hani is part of, let me read their names, the signatories: MT Hani, Chris, W Hembe, or is it Hembe?
Hempe.
ZR Mbengwa, Jack. Tamana Kopozi, they call it Roxa. Leopard Pito, JS Mushe, Mlenze. Ntabenkosi Fipaza Mbali. Some of the names are pseudonames, I think, because of a struggle.
Nom de guerre. Yes, and military names. Nom de guerre. The name for war.
Yes. Chris is 25 years old in 1968. He's born in 1942. He's 65, 25, 20. He's in his mid-20s, it would be called. I don't know about the rest, but just to put, I always keep that in mind. Anyway, what are the circumstances, Comrade Ronnie, what is the state of the organization after Wankie, Sipolilo, and the Navy? The Navy Victoria is later.
That's 72, 71.
Yes.
Aventura, that's a bit later. That's other.
So Wankie and Sipolilo.
Yes, basically.
Major military campaigns.
Into Zimbabwe, yeah.
Yes, but now it's after this. What was the state of the organization before these grievances? If one was looking at the African National Congress, the South African Communist Party, Umkhonto Wesizwe at the time, you were to give an organizational report, what would be the key overarching aspects that would knit together the state of the organization?
Well, one of retreat, the organization both ANC and Communist Party has really been smashed in an organizational structural sense inside the country. Post the sabotage campaign, 61, 63, inception of MK, but then the blows fall and the Rivonia leadership are all picked up, and hundreds, thousands, in fact, around the country caught up in the arrests that take place. So it's a huge blow, an incredible setback. In a sense, it's the depths, the nadir of the movement. The question of whether it's going to survive or not is in the reckoning. And because of the durability, the commitment, the fact that there was this aspect of independent Africa, which meant across the borders there was refuge, as tenuous as it might have been at times, was a saving grace. The key thing, of course, is that we had an experienced leadership that had managed to escape the arrests. People like Tambo, Kutani, Duma Nokwe, J.B. Marks, Joe Slovo, Yusuf Dadu. They're in London because it's quite difficult for a non-black African to lead and be prominent in Africa. The movement was, in one sense, licking its wounds, but not to that kind of hand-wringing extent. We really believed in the struggle that we would survive, and the contradictions of the system were so great that we would be on the rebound, and that actually happened. But the attempt to get back into the country, where we had in Exile 500 plus trained guerrilla fighters, Comrade Mavuso, one of them, the earliest in the groupings in Moscow. He was in one group, Chris Hani in another. They're the first people being trained to that degree. I'm from the group with Modise and Mabida and others, big groups, 150, 160 people being trained later in the Soviet Union and Odessa. So a situation in which things at home were very bleak, and people at home full of despair, those who survived keeping their noses to the ground. The leadership outside weren't primarily a military leadership. They were sent out to organize the ANC abroad and the Communist Party abroad, and international solidarity and support for the struggle inside. In their midst were these 500 or so trained, highly trained guerrillas rearing to go to get back in the country. And one of the ways this was done was the incursions into Zimbabwe. Mavuso, as I said, one of them, and you can speak a lot about that. They actually do very well. They prove themselves in battle, but they don't reach South Africa. Just to recap, the Hani group end up captured in Botswana and are in prison for something like a year, and then they return to Zambia. The situation in Zambia has been a grueling one of the ANC there attempting to reorganize, a setback as a result of the Zimbabwe incursion not having succeeded fully. And I think one can say correctly, again, Mavuso, who's there, talk about it, but quite a degree of demoralization and finger-pointing. And the fact that in the leadership, there was a group, the Makawani brothers and Themba Mkoto, who was called Alfred Kong, quite prominent intellectual. They were in a state of a rebellious spirit, not of the correct kind, factionalism, where they resented the fact that Makawani, Ambrose, was not the leader of MK. This had been settled back in 1975. They were now blaming the Joe Mudisi as the commander, and behind him, the top leadership for the failures. So it was rather right with that kind of problem, of rumor mongering, of pointing fingers, blaming people, etc. The group from Botswana come back into that situation and they feel aggrieved as well. I think the main error that is made, and I can't to this day really understand why they weren't given a rip-roaring welcome as real heroes from the battlefront who had also been in prison. I think that's a major mistake. We begin to look at these subjective factors, and this group, particularly, and I must say this group, and you've read out the names, I know quite a lot of these comrades and trained with them. They're all about the same age, by the way, same age as Chris, mid-20s, late 20s, maybe 30 or so. They have their complaints, and they find that that particular trio I've referred to receives it, welcomes it, empathizes, but they have an agenda of their own. They want to topple a leadership that's in place, and all the fingers are pointed in that direction. That gives rise to a great degree of the differences. The Hani group are actually isolated, and again we should go to Mavuso for the situation on the ground. Just to complete the contextual aspect at this point, because fingers get pointed at Joe Modise, who's the commander, one bears in mind three things. One, that we were basically broken back home. Secondly, that the external structure and leadership is not set up for military activity at all. It's set up, as I've said, for international solidarity and keeping the ANC politically alive and interacting in Africa particularly. And then third, the fact that there's a strategic crisis, a crisis of strategy, whereby we make a major error, which we are aware of through all the discussions about guerrilla warfare, that you can't expect a guerrilla band to go into a vacuum and begin to set up political structures. You've got to have that in the first place. So I just want to say that when we look at a figure like Joe Modise, who becomes the butt and the person that fingers are pointed at, he at that stage is like the single identified military commander who bears all the brunt and responsibility of setbacks.
Comrade Mavuso, you were the communications head of Wankie. You sat in the strategization, and you were in the camp when Chris came back, together with the comrades that were incarcerated, long actually beyond Sipolilo. I wonder if you want to add firstly something to really, what were the circumstances that were attaining in the camp? What was the mood? What was the life? What were the real concrete circumstances on the one hand? But if also you could be able to say something in relation to the leadership itself. And through that, I will go into some of the problems. This problem Comrade Ronnie is speaking about. Who are the leaders? What I understand at this stage is, the NEC members. These are the leadership of the ANC, top leadership of the ANC are national executive members of the ANC. I must assume all of you at that stage, yourself, Chris, and the rest of the names that you've read here, are people who are not in the national executive, committee. Also, that's something we have missed. These are not, at this stage, these are MK combatants. But if you could also paint for us, on the ground, in the camp, who are the National Executive Committee members? Who is there deployed for strategic ANC work? Who is there for MK work? Who just paint for us the picture?
Well, first of all, I need to congratulate Comrade Ronnie for the freshness of his memory and the lucidity of his mind. I absolutely take my hat off to you for that
And
recollection.
3 years ahead of you.
Yes, that's right. I want to take it a little bit back before Lusaka, where the memorandum was written by Chris and 6 other comrades, and the circumstances surrounding that. We arrive from training in Moscow, for some of us, in 1964, and are sent to Congo. And for some reason, we are told that we will be on our way home within a year, at most 18 months, but things are okay. So we get to Congo as the first group there, 43 of us. Chris's group from one area in Moscow and my group. And we are under the leadership of Ambrose Makiwane, who had already been who was an established leader from home, had been in Cairo representing the ANC. So he seemed eminently qualified to me to run a camp that was only a transit camp. He hadn't trained militarily. So more people come, including Comrade Ronnie from training, later in 1964, 65 mostly. And they all believe that they'll be on their way home within a very short time. So, and this doesn't happen because there is a real problem about going home. The route has not been properly charted. The main obstacle is transit. From Tanzania to South Africa, you have to go through Zambia and Botswana. Very supportive countries, but also extremely cautious about having trained people in their countries. So the earlier attempts to get to South Africa were through Zambia and Botswana. And people would be caught by this. Oh, okay. We were aware, for Zambia, for instance, this is 1964-65. Zambia has just obtained independence in 1964. And for the first 6 months or so, the leadership of the army, of the police, is British. And you are heading towards South Africa. It was clear that you were not ever, whatever the politicians thought, however sympathetic they were to the struggle, you were not going to say, we're on our way to Southern Africa. So we did not get into Zambia legally. We would come, there is a car that would be allowed to go through with the driver and whatever, and we would come in through the fence and join it later on. So we eventually get people sent into Botswana to check the route and so on. And when they are caught, the Botswana, I think they don't buy this story of why these comrades are in Botswana, because they were not going to say, we're on our way to South Africa, so we've come to check something here and so on. But they would catch them and send them back to Zambia. which was a nice thing. If they were hostile, they would have said, "You're South African, go to South Africa." So it happened repeatedly. In the end, in the meantime, in this Congo, people are becoming very restless. I can tell you that morale was extremely high in the beginning. And you would have thought that the war area is not really a dangerous area. Whenever the truck, there was a Land Rover, the DO1911, DO1911, which used to ply between Congo and Dar es Salaam. Whenever it picked people up and took them away from the camp, guys would be excited and say, "Wow, I'm China, you've been, like in Fafi, that you're lucky, you've drawn your lucky number, you're going," and so on. But in the end, people discovered that people were not going beyond Dar es Salaam and later Lusaka. And the waiting there aimlessly, we had political lessons, classes, and we would do things. Really, we did not fully occupy people's minds. And I think there began a feeling that we are not ever going to go home. Contrast this to people who had gone for solidarity work, diplomatic work, who are not in a camp, who must travel to conferences.
They've got activity.
Yes, but we are in the camp there. We don't know much about hotels. When you hear that somebody is in New York or wherever in a hotel, they're having a good time. I'm not sure that they were always having a good time, but the kind of freedom they had, contrasting, and that's where the decisions were being made in that sector of, at that level of the organization. So people began to accuse the leadership of not being interested in going home, in taking us home. And there was restlessness, and desertion started. And you could only desert being in Tanzania to Kenya, because the Tanzanians would catch you if you left the camp illegally and take you back there. But the Kenyans were quite open and welcoming people who said, "No, we're facing difficulties there. Either they want to kill us, or they said we should go home, we want to study now," and all of that, and sitting idle and so on. So a lot of people started deserting. Morale was getting low. I'm really fast-tracking this now. Then the opportunity to travel through a country where you would not succumb, you'd not just give up when you are arrested. You would never want to fight against the Zambians or the Botswana if they arrested you. These were friendly countries. But in Rhodesia, as Zimbabwe was called then, the ZAPU were fighting, and Joe Modise, I think it was, approaches them to say, "Guys, how about forming an alliance? We want to go through to South Africa, but if there is anything that happens there, we will all fight because you are fighting," and so on. And ZAPU, it excited them no end. They were very enthusiastic about this proposal, and preparations start being made in the camps for people to go through Zimbabwe. ZAPU had not started operating in that area. They were fighting in Zimbabwe, but not in that area. And the corridor that you're really looking at is across the Zambezi, just east of Victoria Falls, and down northern Matabeleland, if you're successful, down to Limpopo and into South Africa. That was the idea. And there would be a transit base created in Zimbabwe, so that future incursions into the place would be briefed there, takeable, and so on. So this is what starts causing some problems. When this development was brought to the comrades in Congo, and people were moved to camps to start training together with ZAPU in preparation for going through Zimbabwe. The numbers being called in for training seemed to be large, too large, actually, for an operation, a guerrilla operation. So the suspicion now was, these guys are launching us. There was an expression that was used imitating the space technology. You're being launched into space where you'll just orbit alone. We don't know anything about Zimbabwe. So there was no excitement among some of the comrades, but there are others really like the group who got trained and started making preparations, who were in Zambia. And in August 1967, people are ready to cross. But there's been a suspicion, and the coming together with ZAPU had also generated more desertions, because there was just a suspicion that there is something here. These people are trying to get rid of us. They can't take us home, but putting so many of us into Zimbabwe. There was that. The people who crossed the Zambezi on August 2nd, 1967, took the whole night crossing. 79 of them. 53 from the ANC, the rest from Zimbabwe. So with that kind of size, there was absolutely no way that in short course, the Rhodesians would not discover that there is a group of people in military things, when you look closely, carrying arms and so on. And we debated this. I want you to know this. The size. Comrade OR came in to attend the meeting in Livingston before people crossed. And it just puts me in an awkward position, but that's it. And he says, everybody ready? In attendance were some of the leaders were crossing. Chris, guy we call Jojo, Lennox, and so on. The nom de guerre was Jojo. Are also in the group that's going to cross, which actually gave them a which beefed them up. It was really, the people who crossed, none of them, I think I can say, was hesitant about crossing. There may have been a few, but the morale, the motivation was extremely high. And so Corridor says, yeah, we're ready to go. And he ambushes me and says, vous, Mavuso, vous, they used to call me vous. I understand you have some problems with this mission and so on. I said, can you explain what are your difficulties? Said, absolutely no problems except the size. And I've been part of reconnaissance groups. We have not gone more than 30 kilometers at most south of the Zambezi. So we don't know anything beyond that. And this large number of people is bound to be spotted. And when they are spotted, there are no withdrawal lines. And there is really no established communication system. So we'll hope for the best luck and so on. One of the people in attendance was Moses Mabhida, who had similar views.
As yourself.
Yes, and expressed them very strongly. And say, remember him saying, you're ramming this thing down our throats. I think the argument being not that there's anything the matter with fighting in Rhodesia, but that we're acting in desperation. And one can understand the desperation because the people who had been crossing would be in twos and threes, and they're caught and it finishes. So a larger number was there. But that was it. This thing was just, Chris was in the meeting and spoke very strongly in favor of the project. And very impressive, of course, because this is a person who need not have been there, but volunteered to join the group and go and so. So, but in the end, after discussions, the most unfortunate participant there was Peter Tladi, who was called his Nomduker. His name is Lawrence Pukanoka, who had been assigned to go with the group that would be going to what we call in Limpopo, some place in Limpopo now. And he also held the view that it wasn't too good to send such a large number of people. It obviously wasn't. So, but I think the pressure had to do with, we need to go, the AU now, Liberation Committee, is saying you were the first to arrive in Congo and we haven't seen battle. In the meantime, Frelimo had come, SWAPO, MPLA that come after us and since moved on. So it was a very awkward situation for us. And but for them, we should have the OAU, especially the Liberation Committee. The Liberation Committee was a group that was serviced the fighters. They should have known better, because there was a time when they sent a delegation to Botswana to say, guys, it looks as if people are trying to cross are having difficulties and so on and so forth. But I mean, the issues of sovereignty had to be respected. And really, the fear was that if you have uncontrolled movements and people coming up to the place, the Boers are going to attack them, and which they did in subsequent years. So that's that then. So the crossing did take place, and within 8 days, the group was spotted. In fact, in 8 days, I think food started running out. Somebody was sent to check where things could be bought. People had money. And I forget to say, but I don't think this is the detail you're wanting for your interview, that after crossing, a small group of 10 went to do some reconnaissance ahead of the group. Some of them got lost and ended up in Botswana. This is clearly by mistake, were close to the Botswana border and so on. And some of them never found the group again. But around the 8th day, subject to correction about the number of days, one of the guys who had bunions and was finding it difficult to walk, I think just was overcome by fatigue or what have you, sat down and surrendered himself to the Rhodesians and told them that there were people, and the Rhodesians started following the group, who had since moved on, and they were in the reserve, Wankie, which was called Wankie. And you don't want us to go into too much detail on this.
Yes, because you've already covered ground of the actual expedition and campaign.
Okay, fine.
What I want to maybe push you towards is on the return of the prisoners and the comrades that were then arrested following the campaign. What they are in the camp. I mean, maybe you take from what Comrade Ronnie was saying. They come back and it's as if nothing.
Okay. I butt in, if you don't mind, just very briefly to make a comment, 2 points about the incursion into Zimbabwe. And his memory is so good and accurate, by the way. I just wanted to say 2 things there in the sequence. So the one thing, Mavuso, of course, 69 plus are crossing the Zambezi, but it's not that the detachment, if we can call it that group, is moving together. they
yeah.
disperse into groups of 10 people or so, as you've mentioned, just to make it clear.
Okay.
But the main point that I would like to say at this particular point in time, the problem and the errors that were made aren't just specific to a movement like MK, armed wing of ANC. Just to give you in historic terms, what happened in Cuba with Fidel, something rather similar in 1955, 56, after they released from prison. They prepare in Mexico, and they have a group of about 150, 160, if I remember correctly, and they land on the Grandma boat, a beat-up old yacht, and they land in the southeastern part of the island all together, and they are similarly caught, even worse than us, killed, arrested, captured, and so on. And it's only 12 of that whole group who survive. It's like a legend, but it's true. And they get to the Sierra Maestra, and there it's said that Che Guevara says with the 12 are there, and he says, "We have survived, we'll carry on the struggle, the days of Batista are numbered." So one does need to understand the tensions, the issues, the debate as one moves on in terms of the revolution. Not any form of contradiction, just to add on.
I do want to propel you, Comrade Mavuso, to the aftermath.
Okay.
I am careful, obviously, not to be too restricting, but if we are able to say the group comes back, it would have been 1969 or so, I don't know.
Let me do that.
What do they find in the camp?
Maybe no. I'm going into too much of a detail, but I can say people went in and fought excellently in 3 battles, excellently, outstandingly. And in the end, because with the passing of time, everybody in the security in Rhodesia was after these people, they retreated to Botswana and didn't fight there. Then later, at the end of that year, we launched something else in what is called Sipolilo. Larger numbers here, more time spent, absolutely more time. For 3 months, the people are in Zim, and the enemy hasn't picked that up. And when the enemy did realize that there were so many people, the fighting breaks out, and it doesn't actually happen anything as well as it did in...
So when Sipolilo was happening, Chris was in
prison. So Sipolilo, I want to talk about the mood in Lusaka. So the crushing really of the Rhodesia initiative demoralized a lot of people back in the camps. So this happened, Sipolilo happened late, end of the year, part of 1968 and so on, 68. So when Chris and them come back, they find a group of people who have been demoralized by the failure of the campaign as a whole. You know, despite the good fighting in battle, the project, the objective of getting South had not. People were very demoralized. So when these heroes, and they were absolute heroes, Chris and company, arrived in Lusaka, they really came to a very cold reception. There was no hostility towards them at all from the comrades, but, you know, they were demoralized in their own right. What I think would be very difficult to excuse is the absence of a person from the office in Lusaka, political office, to be present to receive them. But they didn't take that well. But we sit, and we were friends, by the way, with these guys. I was, the Pizzo, whom you mentioned here, used to share a room with me, and he was in communication like me. So we talked and so on. The sense of frustration is understood, and I think people would have known that it's demoralization. However, then Chris and a number of comrades sit down to write about the situation.
Yes.
And this is the memorandum that you're talking about. Hwangwe finishes with people going into Botswana. Then much later, Sipolilo. We spent months reconnoitering the area, going in, out, and Joe Modise himself at one time went in to check what the score was, what the situation was. And people then crossed around Christmas time. And there was a large number of them, over 100, and the majority of them Zimbabweans. And I have to say that bases had been established in the reconnaissance up to about 70 kilometers south of the crossing point by people who were established in the area. So the learnings would have been, I think, that do your reconnaissance and not just throw people in and so on. But I mean, that's when the fighting broke out, then and to say this, the level of the morale wasn't anything like in Hwangwe. And we suffered more casualties there. And I think all of which had an impact on what we want to talk about. But when Chris Hani and comrades come back to Lusaka, they find a demoralized group of people in Zambia, and they are not well received. And I want to say, if it's my opinion, it's facts actually, that there was no hostility towards them per se, but just that people thought this Wankie thing, this Zimbabwe thing has not happened and so on. It has not been productive and so on. So there is discontent. There is really nothing happening in Lusaka at the time in the ANC camp, except, low morale. And these people have come from...
At what stage are they coming back? It seems to be the timelines
It's
are a bit confusing for me, because if Sipolilo is late 68,
yeah,
Chris and...
but not late 68, end of 67, and the fighting in Sipolilo broke out in March 1968.
Okay, so early 68.
Early 68.
So by, say, June, July.
Everything had finished. The fighting had
When
finished.
does Chris Hani and his group, when do they, at what time in 68?
Around June, if I recall, around June, July. Thereabouts, I don't really remember.
So how do you explain, two campaigns, Comrade Ronnie? You suffer defeats. Obviously, there is heroism. And but you had Wankie, Sipolilo better executed and learned, from the failures, the weaknesses of Wankie, also gets defeated. Yeah, around March it's defeated. The Wankie group comes back in June. And how can you reconcile the fact that they think nothing is happening?
Oh, go ahead.
Which you are repeating. I'm just saying, if I'm in a camp, two major campaigns back to back, in a camp of 100 people?
200, perhaps 300.
300. That's like 300 soldiers. You've just suffered. There are deaths that goes into tens. There are imprisonments. There are desertions. but there is evidence of an actual attempt. The last of those attempts is March 1968. In June 1968, how do you say there is nothing happening? Even in September 1968, how could you come to me? Or even in January 1969, you could. So maybe my question directly is, how could this be a legitimate observation? But the leadership is doing nothing after two important.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, you need to get something that's going to be. It answers your question. There was a feeling that people were being launched. I mentioned that to you. So many people didn't have an expectation, especially looking at the numbers also who went into Sipolilo, that much would come out of that. It is true that there was more preparation time. And the people were in Rhodesia for at least 2 months, perhaps 3. But, yeah, because the fighting broke out in March 1968. And it didn't last very long. You're asking me the questions that I'll give you the answer, to which the answer are. Morale was not high among the group who fought in Sipolilo. I must be careful because there are people who fought their guts out, but the group as a whole, when the fighting broke out, there are people who just ran, they ran. There was a lot of discord within ZAPU. I'll give you an example of a person, perhaps I mentioned that in my podcast, of a person in base number 3, Zola, Zambia, and I were in there, and there was nobody senior from ZAPU. And so a person is brought to us accused of telling the population that there are South Africans who have come to reinforce the Ndebelés. And this is a Shona-speaking person. And so really sowing discord. And it's almost like causing mutiny. And we were advised by our colleagues, encouraged rather, to deal with the matter there, set up a court-martial and deal with our findings. But it's only 2 senior ANC or MK people and no one from their side. So we decided that we would take that person back, cross the river, and present him to ZAPU for them to deal with the thing. ZAPU was going through a crisis at the time. They were going through a crisis. That person was released within 6. The one that we might have been asked, we've been asked to take care of, was released because ZAPU was having a problem. This is a time when Frolisi was formed, and Chikerema, who was the OR of ZAPU, standing in for Nkomo, actually broke off to form this organization called Frolisi. So they split right at the top. And that's what weakened ZAPU very much. But as an organization, they fell into some difficulties. But the fighting was poor because really it didn't matter that people had been there for very long. When the Rhodesians came, our people had not had not established any serious contact with the communities. So you would fight as little groups against the Air Force and.
Okay, maybe I pick up a few things from the memorandum itself to give the description of that the memorandum puts to the fact that after this Sipolilo, Wankie, maybe the timelines you will advise again. the circumstances that were attaining. For instance, they say the leadership in exile has created a machinery which has become an end in itself. It is completely divorced from the situation in South Africa. It is not in a position to give an account of the functioning of branches inside the country. There have never been an attempt to send the leadership inside since the Rivonia arrest. There's been an over-concentration of people in offices. This has become a fully fledged activity in itself. And they give an example, a director of youth who maintains no liaison with the home front. And they give departments. The Department of the Secretary General, which has not furnished any reports of political activities in the various regions in the country. The Department of Publicity, which has given out propaganda geared only to external consumption. I'm giving a sense of this is like section 1 of the memorandum. It's painting a detachment, a sort of disinterest on the part of the leadership in internal activities in South Africa, establishing links in South Africa, but there's over-concentration of people who are in office as opposed to soldiers.
You know, that paragraph, okay, shall I say, MK came out of the country, trained, and went into camps. They are the people who were expected to come into South Africa and do a lot of these things. You could argue that among MK people in the camp, there should have been leaders. But the leadership that Ronnie explained to you had left early to establish solidarity offices abroad. They had not trained. They knew nothing. There was a real separation, not conflictual, between those who were doing diplomatic work, who were attending conferences and doing other things, and those who were who were preparing to get into South Africa. To be very honest with you, I'm not sure how any of those people who are said to be concentrated in offices would have gone home. And the establishment of contact with home, you know, the same difficulty that we experience going through
Military.
yes, would have been the experience anyone would have. They could only have come as part of the military formation. There is just no other way they would have gone in unless somebody said, yeah, we are going home.
I mean, look at the line, for instance. These people have become salaried employees of the movement, merely salaried. It is high time that all members and cadres of the ANC, be they MK or not, should receive equal treatment and be judged only on the basis of their dedication and sacrifice to the cause we serve. Comrade Ronnie, you may have been part of the people who were in offices.
Well, I was certainly in exile and sent to London by O.R. Tambo in 1965. And what was that all about? We had very good links from Britain to South Africa, business, tourism, people going for studies, black and white, by the way. And in London, under the guidance of both Communist Party and ANC, the whole point was how to rebuild the movement within the country, and we carried that out quite successfully. There were some attempts in Tanzania to try and infiltrate people back home. It wasn't very successful, and I think it's James April, a great hero of that time, still alive today, who talks about the math. Might it be you, Mavuso, in the interviews for the Joe Modise book, that on the basis of a couple of people being infiltrated every month or so. It would take us years and years before you got, 500, 600 back into the country. So that pressure to send a lot of people in was within that context. And the point is that the pressure from Congress, from the very comrades to go home, forced the leadership into that strategy of a incursion in numbers into Zimbabwe. So it really is part of a learning process in revolutionary struggle, and particularly in the problematic factors we face, being so far from the front line, very difficult. And the key thing that the ANC kept coming back to at Morogoro and back to in subsequent years was precisely that you can only send a trained guerrilla fighter into a country if you've got a political base for their reception.
In the community.
Within the community, working within the community. So just to quickly say before, sorry about this, the problems of ZAPU that Comrade Mavuso points to is exactly the same as us. And they are just across the river, the mighty river, but under very close surveillance. And Rhodesia might have been a small settler colony, but they had well-organized, disciplined troops, aircraft, and all the paraphernalia of the military and communication, quite a force to come up against. What was happening in terms of the problems, Wankie and then Sipolilo, is that ZAPU itself didn't have those structures within the people. So you see the similarity.
And you had to rely on
it. Moves one away from the subjective factor of frustration amongst people, and therefore demoralization and desertions and the finger pointing. You have the finger pointing in a military situation when you are rebuffed, when you lose the finger pointing. Mavuso, you've been in the midst of that there. Is much more severe than the political.
But would you give credence? Comrade Ronnie is white. He's got a secondary problem with being based in the continent at the time. You already pointed this out. Indian and white comrades. That is well established even before the ANC goes to exile. Madiba and OR are encountering a problem that the ANC is captured by white people and by Indian people raised by nationalists in the continent. But would you agree, or how do you rate the complaint that, I want to read Chris's words. An equally disturbing situation is that MK is being run completely independently of the political organization. The political leadership aboard is not aware of the activities and plans of MK. We therefore infer that MK is separate from the ANC, that there is conflict between ANC and MK, that the ANC has lost control over MK, that there is no coordination, and this has brought about a situation where the ANC is run single-handedly by the commander-in-chief, who appoints and dismisses arbitrarily. As a result, there is a tendency among the members of the headquarters to owe allegiance to the individual who appoints and dismisses them, and it takes a genuine revolutionary to challenge him. We are compelled to blame the national executive for this anomalous situation. I think the commander-in-chief later on, it's Modise.
John Modise.
Yes. You were there, Comrade Mavuso. Maybe they didn't invite you to ride here because they knew you wouldn't maybe agree. Although these are your comrades, some of them are your roommates. Chris was your friend. How do you rate this complaint?
Yeah. Comrade Ronnie has said something about when you really come from a difficult situation like the front and things are not working well, the finger pointing is intensified. But let me take it back. the Morogoro corrected. So there is a good point in what's being made. Yeah.
How about we are building blocks towards Morogoro?
Yeah.
So,
okay.
In the camps, was this, in the assessment, in the experience, a legitimate concern? Was the leadership finding itself at odds from a point of view of organization and a military wing, and the fact that Mudise, Joe Mudise, was calling the shots alone?
Let me try and answer this. We had crisis in the camp in Kongwa, like when guys from what we call KZN now, 29 of them took a truck and said they're tired of waiting in exile. They want to go and fight. I told you about the waiting and so on. Then there were issues of desertions and so on. The leadership would come. J.B. Marx came at one time. Another issue that brought the leadership into Kongwa was the strong challenge of the Commander-in-Chief. Mm-hmm. The Commander-in-Chief position had been given to Joe Modise by the NEC. We had been told about this even before we left our training, that Joe Modise is the Commander-in-Chief. I mentioned that we arrive in Kongwa and you have Ambrose Makiwane, who finds it very difficult to recognize Joe Modise. That's a fact. And when Joe Modise is visiting, it took time. We were in Kongwa, arrived first, this group of ours, and Makiwane is in charge. Later, these guys come, and Joe Modise comes. And when Joe Modise arrived at the camp, he wasn't introduced as the Commander-in-Chief by the people who were in charge of Kongwa camp. He was not.
Essentially by Ambrose.
Essentially by Ambrose and the leadership of the camp.
Was Ambrose Makiwane a National Executive Committee member?
He was.
So was Joe Modise?
Maybe Joe was too. I don't remember now. He was, yeah.
So how was that resolved, the contest?
It was resolved. The leadership, which is said to be absent here and has no authority, came in, sat everybody down, and said, comrades, what had happened? I'm trying to just think what precipitated the crisis.
The KZN.
The KZN thing,
when they lost patience and they took the trucks and they went to Morogoro in complaint.
So the leadership comes to talk about this crisis which has been created by guys from Natal, it was called then, taking a truck and saying they want to go home because the leadership and everybody is not serious about the revolution. Of course, I think it was just some wonderful grandstanding. There was no way you would just get into a truck, go and hope to get into South Africa and so on. But they came to resolve that crisis. Joe Modise had always been given to very hyperbolic statements. His reaction to the Natal group was, this is a desertion. These people must be shot. He modified his position later and said, no, but they must be expelled. It is a desertion. And other comrades. You see, there is already... the people were sympathetic. Some of the people were sympathetic to the KZN group in the camp. And when they were tried, they were kind of, what do you call, pro bono lawyers defending the taking away of the camp. They say these people didn't go to the enemy. They wanted to go and fight. So it's not a desertion, But already we are split in the camp. The people in charge of the camp, including Chris and others, were eventually charged with trying these people. And because of the very strong consensus and sympathy with them, they were sentenced to 2 weeks of cleaning the camp. That's you know. So I mean, this is not your story.
Yes.
So it delays what you want. But I'm saying, when the leadership came, consisting of Tambo, J.B. Marks, I can't remember who else came, they resolved the problem of Makiwane and Joe. And they told everybody that Joe Modise was appointed by the NEC Commander-in-Chief. There is no doubt that Ambrose Makiwane wanted that position.
Let me come to what they say, for instance, later on about Joe Modise. There's an interesting paragraph here. Those who serve in the central task of suppressing and prosecuting dedicated comrades of MK, who have nothing to lose by participating in the struggle except their chains. There is no security department in our organization. For instance, Msomi and Matthews. The arrest of Msomi and Matthews was inevitable, as the fact of their presence in South Africa was common knowledge, as well as comrades bound for home. This situation is tantamount to betrayal. In Morogoro, Joseph Cotton, 50 Shadrach Tladi, Boy Otto are openly flirting with the Peace Corps, an internationally known CIA front, a counter-revolutionary and espionage organization. The first two handle vital information as they are connected with the radio transmission service relaying organizational material. Boy Otto is moving between Zambia and Tanzania transporting MK personnel. And most disturbing is that a comrade raised this matter, and the Secretary General and Chief of Security of the ANC, Tumanokwe, who agreed that the matter of the above comrades flirting with Peace Corps was true and that it should be furnished in writing, but no action was taken. Tumanokwe would also constitute a lot of criticism throughout here. So the behavior of the Secretary General and Chief of Security of the ANC, Tumanokwe, and his attitude towards Comrade James Mlenze, when we proceeded for a meeting, disturbed us greatly. For him to have said that he did not know, did not recognize Mlenze, is a height of indifference and cynicism, and we are really worried about it. Here is a comrade from the battlefront and commander of a unit and a security chief of a vital region, namely Transkei, accorded this type of snub.
You know, honestly, I wouldn't know. I can't tell what went on between Tumanokwe and these comrades when they raised certain questions. Tumanokwe, let me say this thing. One of the problems that happens in the quest for the comrades who drew up the memorandum to present it is that they got from the national executive of the ANC people who gave them soccer, who gave them... The memorandum was drawn up in Tennyson Makiwane's house. People who...
That's the younger brother of Ambrose.
I don't know whether they're brothers or cousins and so on, yes, but yes, yeah.
Was he in the NEC?
He was.
Tennessee.
Tennyson. And he was the person who was involved in taking us across. He represented the NEC in MK. When people were sent to Botswana and elsewhere, it was Tennyson who was arranging things. Absolutely. So
the memorandum was drafted in his room. Please complete that story.
No, it was drafted in his house. In Lusaka, yeah. They would leave the house, the ANC residence in a place called Lilanda, a suburb of, and go to meet the 6 people, or is it 7?
Yes.
and they met at the house. It's clear from the content of the memorandum that they became privy to these things that are being stated in the memorandum here, which none of the MK people knew anything about. Yeah.
And of course, Mavuso, it's not just Tennyson at the house.
Yeah. Oh,
It's a
yeah.
group.
Sorry, I forgot to say.
Yes, maybe give us. It sounds like an organized faction.
Let me tell you.
Exactly.
They met at Tennyson's house. Ambrose Makiwane, who was mainly resident in Tanzania, traveled to Lusaka. So did Alfred Mkota, Hoko, Nomde Plum for him. Yeah. Also, so when this memorandum was drafted in Tennyson Makiwane's house, I don't know, I wasn't there, how much participation, whether they're mere hosts and said, okay, talk guys, you've got space here to do that. Except that when you look at the content, it's clear that matters of the NEC, which no one outside the ANC knew about, found their way into the memorandum.
Written by comrades who were fresh from prison.
Oh, yes, there'd been...
I want to read this section again and then maybe bring the reaction of OR. But just to get a sense of the other big complaint, and it informs my earlier location of their ages, because in a normal political environment, the age at which Chris and these comrades are at would have been the same age of 1944, the age that the chaps that start the youth league would have been mid-20s.
Yeah.
1944.
Yeah, sure.
Anyway, one of their big complaints is about the youth league. This is what they say. We consider the youth in MK as the most revolutionary.
Possibly right.
We strongly feel that we should be consulted on matters affecting the youth. For instance, we must be informed about the revolutionary international youth gatherings, and we should be given priority in the sending of delegates. The farce of the Bulgaria ANC youth delegation should never be repeated, and those responsible should acknowledge the mistake they made. The youth of South Africa is not located in London or in any European capital. We therefore take particular exception to the appointment of certain students as leaders of the ANC youth. Thabo Mbeki, who went to London on a scholarship sponsored by NUSAS, is a leader of ANC bogus youth organization. We are convinced that the ANC leadership in exile is according better treatment and attention to the students. This attitude and practice has had a disastrous effect of diverting many would-be revolutionaries into the academic field. We feel that it is high time the MK personnel, which is in fact the core of our revolution, should be given the best treatment by virtue of having volunteered with their lives to give a supreme sacrifice to the revolution. I can go on, and then you would know the harsh stuff they say about Comrade Joe Modise. I've read about Manokwe. I think it's Thabo More. There are lines about Comrade Thabo More, the commander-in-chief, who is the commander-in-chief. What is I keep saying this, Comrade Mavuso, the youth element, this assessment that there seems to have been dissatisfaction with youth that was not choosing arms. And the idea that only the youth that is choosing arms. Firstly, it is the youth that is actually identified with supreme sacrifice. and by that virtue, most revolutionary, and should be prioritized in the ANC youth activities. A complete rejection as well, that some people are just being diverted to academia.
I think I'll be able to help you. Because in some ways, I was affected at a certain time. I think when we're talking informally, I mentioned that when we got to Francistown, there were young people who were already in MK, ready to go to receive training. And I was sent out of Fort Hare to go and finish my studies abroad because my arrest, together with a few others, was impending. So they said, guys, go. I knew MK existed, but I had not been in MK myself. A lot of people were leaving the country, including Thabo and so many others, who were ANC, but not in MK. Now, the ANC had two houses in Dar es Salaam. The MK house, which was called, I think, Lutuli camp, where you'd have about 50, 60 people are coming before their process. And there was Mandela, which was a place for students, all of them under the wing of the ANC. The ANC found them scholarships and sent them there. And I think it must have hoped that they continue either to study and become potentially good for the revolution when it comes, or they would come back. So I am saying the following. Those who opted to go to Mkhonto Wesizwe went straight to military training. They were not mixing up with any civilians and that kind of activity. Their task, was to wait and be given the opportunity to go home. It was just never, there would never have been a thought that let's get some of the people in MK and take them to conferences. Not at the time. Not at the time, because you were there. Part of the complaint was that people are sitting idle and you're unable to take them home, but they're sitting there because they were waiting to go into this thing. So I am saying...
Why would comrades raise it in this way if by policy, people had those options? But also this idea already here, and I'm very specific here, Comrade Mavuso, this memorandum gets abused a lot. But this line about TM ultimately being sponsored by NUSAS.
What nonsense.
Well, what do you, I know you were not part of them, but...
No.
Were you comrades gossiping about such matters?
No, wait a minute. I would not be able to know. I never, who sponsored Thabo. Maybe it was NUSAS. I really don't know. It's not anything that we used to discuss. Thabo was not there. He went to study like other ANC people. Many of them ended up in MK. And when he finished his studies, Sussex, I think, he came to join the ANC and he went for training. Zolile Ngagane, I think there are many.
Max Uselu.
Yeah, Max. They started at university studying and came back in. I would imagine, for instance, that while those people, Max Sisulu and others, they would be the ones to call upon to go and represent the ANC, because you dare not expose people who are being ready to go home. So there was absolutely no way you would take people away from what you promised you would do to them, deliver, get them home and so on. I think it's not very helpful to the memorandum factually. It really makes no sense at the time. There was just no way.
You could take a person being prepared to infiltrate as a soldier and say, go be in a you are exposing them.
Well, that's the contradiction. They want to go back home above everything, which means secrecy, your identity. And then there's a statement, why aren't we being sent to the European capitals or even to Bulgaria where there was this youth festival? You're going to be revealed. If I was being prepared to go back home, I would not want to go openly to any of these Western countries or even to a university in Dar es Salaam. So it's full of these contradictions, and it's in part.
What does it mean, Comrade Ronnie? Is it the age of the comrades? Is there something else happening around this memo? And Comrade Mavuso, you were beginning to say part of where it was drafted, there were NEC members who had sharp differences with Modise.
Yes.
I mean, they call out Modise in the most radical terms. And let me read one line or two. For instance, about More. About Thabo More.
Oh, Thabo More.
There is a certain symptom. There are certain symptoms which are very disturbing and dispiriting to genuine revolutionaries. These comprise the opening of mysterious business enterprises, which to our knowledge have never been discussed by the leadership of the organization.
Oh my God.
For instance, in Lusaka, a furniture industry is being run by the ANC. In Livingston, a bone factory, whose original purpose was to provide cover for underground work in Botswana, is now being used as a purely commercial undertaking. As a result of these enterprises, more and more MK men are being diverted to them. And some of the people in charge of these enterprises are dubious characters with shady political backgrounds. We are therefore compelled to conclude that there is no serious drive to return home and carry on the struggle. This is disturbing because the very comrade, Thabo More, who is supposed to be planning, directing, and leading the struggle in South Africa, is fully involved in these enterprises. Now he has assumed complete responsibility for the running of these enterprises in collaboration with others, and it is extremely doubtful that with his attention so divided, he can do justice to the armed struggle in South Africa, which should be the primary and absolute. The leadership of the ANC can't but be blamed for this state of affairs. I thought I give. It is so. What is happening there, at least?
Isn't that all rumors?
No,
How much is gossip and rumor? And if the ANC, as was the case, sets up front companies like Star Furniture in Lusaka, like the Bone Factory, and other such enterprises, will everybody be told or party to the fact that these are front companies? And what do they know of how they're being run? And whether, in fact, it's being run for self-interest. Mudisi was involved in these and other such enterprises as any revolutionary movement worth its salt. The attempt to smuggle back weaponry in the secret compartments of furniture and so on, the coffins going back or being exported from Zambia to Botswana. Sometimes they had a person inside. There are anecdotes along those lines. So how does one penetrate aspects of this document which in part, because it's not as though everything is a tissue of lies. It's not as though there wasn't neglect of comrades in the camps, but it's all put together in such a way to point at people who they don't want to be in leadership. And it's also possible that some leaders need to be replaced. There was a problem with Dumanokwe, if we're going to be very open, where he fell from grace, and that was an inclination to use alcohol to excess. And this is why he was demoted from being the Secretary General after the Morogoro Conference. But it's highly emotional. There's so much that's based on rumor mongering and gossip that at the time, this document was not taken seriously. You know, you can go through more of it. There's the part about Joe Mudisi being attacked because he had a Peugeot 404, a fairly nondescript, a very good vehicle at the time. And he's using this as his private property. How does he have a car? My goodness, this is the guy who's the commander of MK. And if you go to the Zimbabwe comrades who regard him as such a dedicated military commander, they explain it in their interviews, not part of this particular memorandum, as thank goodness for Joe Modise and his Peugeot, because when we were as ZAPU trying to smuggle weapons from Tanzania into Zambia, it was very difficult because such military-style vehicles were constantly under suspicion. And as Mavuso points out, the British were very well entrenched in the security aspects in those earlier days. And they say that we relied so much on Joe Modise actually driving the vehicle with a ZAPU comrade and taking in the stocks of weapons. That's fact. That's not saying, as is the case here. And it's fact-based by huge evidence what that car was about. And as is the case with all the other gossip-based accusations and allegations.
Maybe, Comrade Mavuso, can you triangulate for us this Ambrose Makiwane Modise fight? And perhaps as you do that for us, finally bring in OR and his reaction to the memorandum.
By the way, we discussed the memorandum with Chris afterwards. Well, he's not here, so I will not say anything, and he's unable to do that. But, yeah, you know, he was such a hero, and he's not here. I think if he was here, he would be saying a lot more of what Ronnie is saying. You're talking about age, perhaps at that age, and being under pressure, and facing possible death, and you come back and find people relaxed, you are given to these kinds of outbursts and anger and so on. This factory, Star Furniture, used to make, what do you call this, false bottoms.
False bottoms.
Yeah.
False bottoms.
Ndate rank, Ndate Chulu, 100 years he is today, was put in one of those and crossed into Botswana.
In a false bottom.
False bottom covered with ice. One of them was Uria Mokebe.
Paper.
Yes.
There's a here. Quite a stalwart, in fact.
Oh, absolutely. So there was a comrade, we used to call him Ratas, I don't know the real name at home, who had been put out as a fisher, as a fishmonger. He drove a a bakkie, as we call it in South Africa, up and down across the Kazungula Bridge, some Botswana and some buying fish. That was a decoy, what you call it in proper English. But the aim of that business was to take people across Kazungula to do reconnaissance in the area in northern Rhodesia then, and also the route towards South Africa. So the reason for the existence of staff furniture wasn't just to make money, which, by the way, was extremely helpful. It was monitored by Tom Gobi, who was the TG at the time. There was Jimmy Pambo, who's late now, who was the accountant.
Is Thomas Ngobi Shadrach Gladi?
No.
Oh, that's a different...
That's a different one.
Okay.
So they could only have known, if this is a fact, that the leadership doesn't know about it from people who sat on the NEC. How would I know that staff furniture is unknown
So this is
to the rest of
that
the
the NEC members were furnishing there.
We're saying, no, we don't even know what's going on in that.
Yeah, look at Mudise. So it sounds much like a complaint, because I do want to say something about how I don't know who between the two of you will say what happened to the Magiwanas. But you were explaining an earlier problem of Bruno Mdolo, where it's obvious, it's open, it's publicly known. Where Mdolo's complaints often sounded like this about specifically Walter Sisulu. That Walter Sisulu's house has expensive furniture. How can he afford expensive furniture? These comrades are not what they say they are, and all of that. Am I wrong, comrade?
That's exactly it, as you recall, what Bruno Mtolo, who gave the evidence at the Rivonia trial and the Tel trial. And he says, well, I started doubting these leaders when I went into Walter Sisulu's house. My goodness, 1960 little house in Soweto with some furniture. And he goes on and exaggerates. So we're coming down to how human beings, for whatever motive, either utter frustration, and in saying this about Bruno Mtolo, I'm not transferring this to the writers of the memorandum, but who, in his case, he collapses, he collaborates with the regime, and now it's all of this exaggeration about leaders who live a wonderful life.
I wouldn't be too quick to dismiss the tendency of this degeneration to the potential for collaboration. But before I do that, Comrade Mavuso, was there regionalism in the camp?
Yeah, I wished I didn't come to this interview. The memorandum in the first instance was not popular at all among the generality of the comrades. And really, it's because of this misfortune. You see, the leadership in Kongwa at its establishment under Ambrose Makiwane consisted of people who came from one region, overwhelmingly. There were only two who didn't come from that region. It was Bonyo, what was Lefonon, yeah.
And basically from Lesotho.
Yes. And Robert Miema, who's died now.
Robbie.
We ended up.
Which region is this?
From Gauteng.
Ramotsi, sorry.
I know you're talking about Gilbert.
Yes.
So he was from a Mpumalanga.
Yes. Or Limpopo. So those are two people who were in the leadership who were not from the Eastern Cape. You are taking me into an area that I really don't like too much. And that is it. No not nobody. We were completely untouched, uninfluenced, unconcerned as the first group of 43 about those appointments. They were all worthy appointments. I mean, if I was Ambrose, I would have spliced it with more people from other areas as well. But also, there was a sense that we're in transition. What does it matter if you're in the leadership now? We should be gone in a year or so.
So this is the leadership of the camp.
This is the leadership of the camp,
Which was predominated by people from the Cape.
Eastern, well, now Eastern Cape,
Specific
yes, but it was the Cape. Pitso, I think, came from Cape Town, but the rest of the other people came from the Eastern Cape. Huh?
Oh, yeah.
Now, when the memorandum is drawn up, it's also that same group from the same region, exclusively. If these problems of MK are so bad, they should affect everybody. And you should be able to pick people from other places who would make common cause with you and say, let's do this and so on. I don't know why the mistake of not inviting other people who you would assess them, maybe, not maybe, there are people who would not have agreed to be part of the memorandum. There are people who would have agreed and might have influenced it differently, but never. I mentioned that Pitso was a roommate. And
So he would go and be part of this without telling you?
On the eve of the distribution of the memorandum, he said, hey, Wally, Walter, with this document, man, and so on. So I say, what document? And he shows it to me. And, among other things, I didn't even read all of it. I just looked at the names and I said, oh my God, I know the reaction of the Mgwenya. Mgwenya is the guys. Just looking at that, they will recall Congo. No, I don't think.
What is to recall Congo? The fight of Modise and Ambrose?
Also that subsequently. But also the leadership, which seemed acceptable in Congo of that group. Makiwane, of course, is the Islamic Qatar is appointing these people. Then he quarrels with Joe because he wants his position. I am telling you the truth. He wanted that position. And it wasn't given to him because it had already been given to Joe Modise. He might have made a better commander-in-chief. I don't know. But the fact is that the position had been filled already.
So in some way, those divisions find themselves to a nonetheless more or less legitimate concern about inactivity, strategy, and broader questions of the direction of an armed struggle.
Yeah, we got divided at a certain time in this Congo. And, there was a period when it was quite sad. You got the Natal group eating alone, and you got the Cape group also sitting together for life. The Gauteng guys, as we call it today, kind of more flexible. And by the way,
and Joe Modise is Transvaal.
Transvaal. Yeah. He was Transvaal. And you see, there came issues about him being a Tsotsi. You are opening a very difficult discussion. Who is not educated?
Yeah, because there was only questionable political background.
Well,
what was Joe Modise?
Well, let me tell you,
Tsotsi gangs
of
the 1940s and 50s.
I've got hard things to say about Joe. I do. Anybody who left around 1962, 63 for MK, Joe called in Durban, East London, PE, was in here collecting people. He drove this. The reason he wasn't even at Rivonia was that he had been shipped out because I think he was very much marked and so on. But I am saying, how can he have been a nobody if he was entrusted with the task of recruiting people and taking them across the border? And he did that. No one can change that fact because that's what happened. Now, I don't know, maybe not Mutsualedi, who was one of the treason of the Rivonia people, weren't he?
Andrew Mulangeni,
No.
Elias Mutsualedi, Andrew Mulangeni, Ray from PE.
Mhlaba.
No, not him.
So who are you searching for?
Gosh.
3, and then Govan and Walter and Madiba.
Mulangeni. It was
Mulangeni.
Andrew, yeah.
Oh, yes, it's Mulangeni.
Yeah.
I know what story you're coming with, but I interviewed you.
I don't know
it's
if
relevant.
But I did. I was also curious when we came back eventually to South Africa. Say, exactly, Joe Modise, what role did he play in all these things? And he said, I took his place in Rivonia.
Yeah.
Because he had to go. He said he was a member of that high command. I don't know if you... That's what he told me. So, but I really discount completely. It's not worth this arguing about whether Joe was a senior leader or not. He may have driven Duma Nogwe's car and all of that and so on. But, suddenly he gets to Exile and he's made a commander-in-chief from nowhere. It doesn't wash, but there are issues. You see, people spoke Tsotsital there also. And he also did speak quite a bit of Tsotsital, except Wuzet and all of that. And I think he was just now being regarded by some people as a Tsotsi, you know.
I have a...
But I really, I'm making points which hurt me because I really...
So they can't be serious in terms of that phrase that nobodies are in important positions, because this is a man who's well known. He was in the treason trial, Joe Modise.
Yes.
He was a lieutenant of Madiba's in the Defiance campaign. So they throw that out. It's thrown out. And it's a ridiculous statement. So no name given. Who are they talking about, for goodness sake? Any of the people that they really fingered and named are people from Duma Nokwe to Joe Modise who were known as leaders in the country. But that's the problem. They undermine there the actual real grievances which do exist, and the big problem of a strategic approach.
The idea is there's crisis, division, as you put it, memorandum, and there are NEC members that you have put out, Modise against Makiwane, Ambrose Makiwane. And it looks like there's also a problem of regionalism that was emerging, which had taken root for a couple of years in the IMIC. What did Oliver Tambo do in response?
Yeah. The publication of the memorandum really shocked and disappointed OR. It really did. There is a number of occasions when he was invited by the comrades to talk about things, and they would refer to the memorandum and say, what's happened to these people? Almost like they come from your area. There are some really nasty things that followed up, which had nothing to do with the OR that we know. But what hurt him the most, and he said, this is the first crisis for the ANC since we came out. We had the other crisis I was talking about, desertions, Natal people going, say, this is the first crisis we're experiencing because there is a division within the National Executive Committee. Some members are using this memorandum as a doormat on which to rub their dirty feet. He was very hurt about the criticism of Kotane, or Moses Kotane in particular.
Yes.
Really, they worked very closely. And
Kotane was at the time the general secretary of the party.
what was it? Was of the party, but also treasurer of the ANC.
Yes.
And so funds would come out of his office. And there was a feeling about he liking Joe overly, something like that. So, and he's attacked, as you know, in the memorandum. That really hurt OR because he knew Moses Kotane and knew him well. I don't think they mentioned J.B. Marks specifically in the memorandum.
Possibly not, yes.
But he also was saying, how do these people who are bothered about issues in MK, how do they know about things that are happening in the NEC? You know, and so that's what worried him most about. He really was not concerned. I mean, he was thick-skinned in terms of criticism. He welcomed. I'm saying a positive thing about him. You criticized OR. I think some people will be saying this ANC is running dogs off Moscow and things like that. And people said those things and, you know, it almost laugh and so. But this was the most helpful thing. But what he also knew was that it was dividing the people in MK.
Did these comrades get to be taken to some DC? And if so, what was its outcome?
Yes, there was. You give me an opportunity to say something else also that was completely spread falsely. They were disciplined. I don't know who tried them, but the result of the disciplinary action was to suspend them from the organization. That's when Chris I don't think they were suspended as in being driven out of the camps or anything, but
They were suspended as members of the ANC?
I think maybe as members of the ANC, the suspension, I don't remember very well now, but the result of that suspension, by the way, was that Chris wasn't able to attend the Morogoro Conference because he was on suspension. Now, which was sad for me because, you know, to be at that conference and the guy who had just come from the front line is not there because of these issues, you know, it kind of embarrasses you. So OR's reaction was really, really bad, one of shock, one of disappointment. And, you know, with the passing of time, with hindsight now, we can talk about the three people who were from the leadership, who supported, who seemed to have facilitated the drafting of this memorandum.
And they are?
This was Alfred Mbota, that's Nom Duper. Alfred Hokong, he was called, but the MK, Ngota is his real name. Temba Mbota.
That's his actual name.
Temba who?
Mbota,
MQ. You've got the click right.
Yeah. It was him, it was Ambrose Makiwane, and it was Tennessee Makiwane. Those are the three people who were members of the executive who were implicated.
But did not sign.
They did not sign. No, they did not sign. I know for a fact, and everybody who was in Lusaka knew that the people used to go to...
I do want to know what happened, but let me go to the conference itself. And maybe we can bring in Comrade Ronnie here. I want to make two ridiculous, provocations. First provocation. If the memorandum and the issues it raises, as it is known today, was the reason for the Morogoro Conference, are there solutions contained which you can take us through in the strategy and tactics, which was the outcome of the Morogoro Conference?
Yes, definitely. In the first place, the setting up of the Revolutionary Council. open to all races. So not elected, appointed people. And this is where heroes of the group, such as Joe Slovo, Dadu, Reg September, are on the RC. So the statement has good parts to it, which really helps. That's why the negative side is so unnecessary. And that is that they had felt that there had been a failure, let's say an Africanist failure, that all members of the liberation movement weren't involved in decision making. And they did have a lot of confidence in the people that I've mentioned. But the need for a real structure now to deal with all the problems of this exile situation and of returning people to home and building the underground needed a proper organizational form. As I said at the opening of this interview, what we had inherited was the smashing of the structures at home, and then an exile structure which wasn't set up for the clandestine purposes of the armed struggle, so couldn't really cope, and left too much on the shoulders of a particular commander of MK. So that was a very important aspect. The other also that emerges, and doesn't only come from the group that are responsible for signing this, the ones who sign, is a point that the movement everywhere was struggling with, the strategic factor, that we weren't going to be able to develop an armed struggle on home ground unless we had proper internal preparation of a political kind, to create sanctuary, to receive people in safety, and to connect the cadres, the military cadres, with political processes in the country. That's a big step forward. It doesn't, it's not succeeded immediately, and it remains an issue of its implementation going forward, by the way. But that's essential factors there. The other aspect that comes in is a changing world and the question of understanding the international community and the role of the socialist camp, the role of imperialism. That's very much a part of the strategy tactics document. And perhaps incorrectly, the pointing of the finger is only to the communists because of their knowledge and connection with the socialist countries.
Can I
I'll
very
come
quickly,
back to the communists in a bit. Maybe in your in Comrade Mavuso,
if you'll allow me.
yeah.
I just
Can I
want to
add you to speak,
Oh,
but
yeah.
also deal with what happened to Dumanogwe in this conference?
Okay, fine.
Yes.
But I wanted to say a positive aspect of the memorandum is actually the integration of MK, I don't know whether, and the ANC political, gosh, I don't have the right, at the level of the RC.
Yes.
The Revolutionary Council.
The Revolutionary Council. Tambo becomes the commander-in-chief.
Very good
point.
Yeah.
Where before Joe Modise was commander-in-chief, Joe stays as chief of the army. But the ownership, the taking in charge of MK affairs by the president of the ANC was exactly what was lacking, I think, which point is being made.
And then, Mavuso, that's not a punishment as such, or a demotion of Mudisi. It's a recognition of the political primacy over the military, so that the president of the ANC political position is also now the commander-in-chief.
Oh, absolutely. I never would have thought it was a demotion. It really, that's the reason why he was made commander-in-chief. But that's what these guys were saying. The leadership doesn't know what's happening in MK.
Yes.
There was no way in which you would say that now.
It's very much
the SG of the ANC, big criticism of him here. So we know Mudise becomes chief of
the army? What
Well,
was it called?
for a while, that's rather ambivalent.
Yeah.
He's not left as commander of MK. There's an ambivalent outcome because of the contestation, the tension. So you have the president, commander-in-chief, and then there is no identified commander of MK as such. It's reorganized, to remind you, Mavuso, in terms of a command in Lusaka, a command in London, a command in Tanzania, and other structures which are commanding the eastern flank of the country, the western flank of the country. It's actually, they don't bite the bullet. That gets bitten when the High Command of MK is again re-established with Mudisi as the commander in 1983.
I see. To take that long.
Yeah.
All right. We know what happens to him. The second person is Duma Nokwe. What happens to him?
Duma was in charge of security. Really, there's very little that one knew about that. The security system in MK even was always suspect. People were thought to be hounding comrades they didn't like. You know, security should be about looking at what the enemy is doing and so on. But there was always a fear about what we used to call James Bond. The James Bonds are the people who are spying and telling somebody else and so on. But I don't think Duma Nokwe ever kept a group of people who would go and I think perhaps it's the way he reacted to Mlenze when he came that exacerbated his position. I think so. But also you had the three people from the NEC, the Makiwanes and so on, who really did not like Duma at all because he was very, very clear about the role they were beginning to play, the Africanist theme, if I can call it that, at the Morogoro Conference, where people will say, well, you know, it's good for us to come together, but at the driving seats of the ANC,
Africans.
It must be Africans and so on. This thing drifted to what came to be called the Gang of Eight.
But at the conference, before, not to interrupt you, did Duma Nokwe lose the Secretary General position?
Yeah, there were new elections. There were elections, and Alfred Nzo was elected to replace him. And Duma took it so well and continued being the production house. There's no way that Alfred Nzo would be able to have the capacity of Duma Nokwe in terms of writing, etc. With due respect, but he was
an advocate.
But those are just, sorry to perhaps correct you, or you're not thinking elections took place at Kabwe, but not at Morogoro for those positions.
Was it
appointed? The elections take place at Kabwe.
And was Duma just dropped?
Oh yes, he was dropped because it was felt that he had carried out his duties correctly.
But remember, Duma Nokwe, as I understand, had actually been acting on behalf of Walter Sisulu from when the ANC was acting.
Oh yes, it could be.
He had been in that position. I don't think there was including OR.
Yes,
OR had been acting as well as the president of the ANC. Yes, because Luthuli had been under house arrest, blah, 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 blah.
And also until he died. Even after he died, OR was refusing to take the position of president.
Yes. All right.
So that was the key thing. So, and by the way, from all accounts, he took a demotion absolute any rancor, without any complaint, extremely modestly. And he worked in the publicity department in quite a lowly position for several years until he proved that he had the caliber to to give leadership again, but he was never made a top leader again. I think he became part of the NEC at some point.
For your sake, I don't think if you will be able to in a very short space of time. 69 Morogoro Conference, ANC is really at its weakest as an organization. You were mentioning international balance of forces, the socialist camp is thriving and all of that. The strategy and tactics document, quite frankly, reads, like the communists dominated. Was this a capture of the ANC by the SAC?
No, that's...
and specifically the character of Joseph.
In your provocation. In a non-personal sense,
Yes.
I can understand how people view these things. Slovo basically wrote that document. And therefore his theoretical aspect as well as practical, because it was a case of praxis with him. He was always involved in theory and practice. And he pens it and it's accepted at Morogoro. So what he does manage to do is create a document that expresses the aspirations of the ANC, its view, its worldview, without it being a communist or even a Marxist organization, in terms of the National Democratic Revolution, which is a non-communist theory as such. It might originate in the thinking of the communists and the Marxists, but it fits the aspect of what stage we were at in terms of a country that still needed to attain its freedom and independence. And once you attain that, how you develop a democratic revolutionary change where both the political and the economic power resides with the revolution, which we're still engaged in to this day.
Final parts for me is to pick up some names and you will say, where did this person end up? Where did this person end up? Let me start with the 3 NEC members. Themba Mkota.
Okay, he basically disappears almost from view. I can't recall whether he dies in exile, natural causes, or whether it's back in South Africa. He wasn't very well person from a health point of view, and I just can't recall that. I don't know about you, Mavuso.
No, I don't. All I know is that when he was a member of the so-called Gang of Eight.
Yes, it gets expelled at that time.
It was expelled.
1970.
So he was part of the Gang of Eight.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And a very bright person. He had a sharp intellect, for sure.
His editorials in Sichaba.
And could write very well. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I will come back to a quick explanation of this Gang of Eight at the end, maybe because so he is in the Gang of Eight. Ambrose Makiwane, what happened to him?
Okay, so after the expulsion, Ambrose fades from view.
Was he expelled?
Yes, with the Gang of Eight.
He was in the Gang of Eight.
Yes, sure. He was basically, I would say, the leading person in the Gang of Eight. He was a key spokesperson. And he also disappears from view, survives, I'm not even sure where it could have been, living in Botswana or Tanzania or a place like that. Some of these people did carry on living their lives out in that way. Tennyson, so with Ambrose, I see him. It was quite an event. He suddenly appears in about 1995 at the Ministry of Defense in Pretoria. And I bump into him, and he's been with Mudisi, the minister, and they're very chummy, and Tennyson and Ambrose is very relaxed, and we have a very nice discussion. And what I then discover from Mudisi is that, this poor guy, he's missed the dates in relation to military pension, and he's come to see me, and we're fixing that up for him, Ronnie. And I said, first class,
That was right.
Joe.
Well done.
At least he deserves that.
Tennyson Makiwa, was he also in the Gang of Eight?
He was. He was in the Gang of Eight.
Absolutely.
He was a sort of, yes.
Yeah, but later he makes a very strange decision to leave Exile and come to the Transkei by arrangement with Kaiser Matanzima. And so becomes very puzzling for somebody who was so much in the leadership of MK, by the way, in the sense of he was the person who used to look to take them through Zambia and so on, and receive them and so on. He knew what was going on in MK and so on. That he would go to the Transkei and live comfortably there. Yeah, I think some people were asked to assist him out of existence,
As a,
as a human being.
did he in his activities sell out comrades?
I think the very act of going to live in the Transkei with Matanzima was really quite hostile. It's not as if everybody in the Bantustans was like that, but Matanzima was. And to...
Do you know who gave the order?
No, I don't.
You don't know, or you don't want to tell?
No.
Comrade Ronnie,
No,
I put you on a spot here because in the book that you edited, there is a clear story, except this detail of who gave the order.
Well, look, before that, just to remind you, we know exactly that it was an MK comrade based in Lesotho who went into the Transkei and assassinated him. So in relation to who gives the command, there's a commanding center in Lesotho at that particular time.
Chris?
Well, Chris is the commander in that area. And did Tennyson Makawani deserve that fate? He was clearly a traitor. Everything pointed out to the fact, being back in the Transkei, and by the way, being an advisor to Matanzima. And people in Lesotho had very good information about what was going on in the Transkei.
Okay. Chris Hani and Joe Modise. Here there is a vicious fight. What became of that relationship?
I will ask you because at a certain time I left to...
You worked very close.
Yes, indeed.
Both Chris
So I had known Chris in Congo camp, and we both were transferred at the same time by OR from Congo camp to work in Dar es Salaam, and we worked on some project together there for OR. It was all this assessment of documents and books on guerrilla warfare, etc. Got on very well. He's a most lovely person, a lovely human being. I then meet him in Maputo in 1982, where he's withdrawn from the command in Lesotho because there have been several attempts on his life. And we're together at that particular point. So Chris and I, we work. Mudisi is coming and going to Maputo as well. They get on very well. We're working in the military and political structure there. And it was good to see the relationship. In 1983, I'm called to Lusaka. Chris is already there, and the MK headquarters and high command is fully established, as I've referred. And there is the commander of MK, Joe Modise, and his commissar first, who's Chris Hani, later becomes chief of staff. And in all that period, they work very, very well. A respectful relationship, a warm relationship, absolutely no animosity whatsoever. And Chris clearly thought very highly of Mudisi as a commander. And Mudisi thought very highly of Chris, his politics and his involvement of MK and all the duties he carried out. You would think there had been no problem in the past. It was a much maturer Chris, if you harking back to the period we were discussing. And of course, Chris, we can say, was one of the certainly most outstanding products of our movement and of that younger generation and of Mkontarisi as well.
Any other name, Comrade Mavuso? I see there's Hempe, Mpengwa, Kobozi, Leonard Pito, Mushe Mlenze, and then Mbali, who is Ntobekazi Fipaza. Do you remember any of the others? What happens to them?
Migza, it was Kobozi, went to live in West Germany. There was still East and West. And as he aged, he was sent to an old
age home.
Old age home, yes. And he was very cagey. He didn't really want to establish contact with anybody at all. At one time, I was asked when we're back here now to see if he could be contacted because somebody was chasing him and wanting to. But I don't know. I suspect he has since passed. But he stayed in Germany. He left the ANC.
And Mlenze?
Mlenze came back.
I've been late because of the names, but Wilmot MP I knew very well, and I think he came back, but old and probably hadn't lived too long.
That's a lovely guy. Yes, absolutely. He would have overcome the memorandum thing. I don't say he says he regrets it and so on, but he was just the kind of guy who was a trade unionist first and foremost, and. From what I know, he died a natural death.
Okay. And Mlenze?
Mlenze came back into the country. You remember the last operation by sea?
At
Aventura.
Yeah.
71.
71, 72. I think it's early 72.
Yeah, but he went in and just sold out completely.
He was a traitor.
He became a traitor and was very vicious with the people. I mean, and he would point them out and they would be tortured.
Yeah.
I remember the person we used to call Madiba, the three who crossed at the Caprivi.
Yes, with the flag.
Oh, yes, with flag.
Yellow.
Yeah. One of them made it to Islandland, Gugompo, and this Mlenze fellow is
sold him out.
Yeah.
But did you manage to do to him what you did to Tenzel?
No, I don't think that was done to him.
No, I don't think anything happened.
Nothing happened.
This brings us to the end of.
Thank you very much.
What is a very
thank you very
famous
much. It's quite a marathon. Thanks very much.